Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's album review is on the Curve's debut album, Doppelgander. Um, it's actually an album that I don't have. I think the first time I heard it was maybe around a decade ago. I decided to review it. I've only heard it a couple times through, but I decided to include it in this one so I can get to know it a little bit better and kind of include it because I do think it goes well and with my 2 weeks of doing reviews of dream pop, indie, and shoegaze bands from mostly from the '90s, a little bit from the '80s. Um, but I thought they would fit in perfect. They're an English rock band. They formed in 1990 and then disbanded in 2005. Mainly, it's Tony Halliday, the lead singer, who also occasionally does guitars, and I believe her husband, Dean Garcia, who does bass guitar, drums, programming, and then also Alan Mulder, who done a lot of work with Mute Records, and I think I know him mostly from a couple Depeche Mode remixes. I think he remixed "People Are People" and maybe "Everything Counts," if I'm not mistaken. And then also Flood produced this album, so there's that's another reason to, if you're big into Mute Records and all the ties when it comes to Flood and Alan Mulder and Mute Records, then Curve is a band to check out because it's right in that style of sound, um, and also in that good taste in music from Mute Records, and anything Floods involved in is going to be pretty strong. If you're a fan of Erasure or Depeche Mode or what have you. Um, Halliday wrote the lyrics to the songs, and they both contributed to the songwriting. Alan Mulder was the prominent collaborator who kind of helped shape their sound and their heavier beats and their more densely layered guitar tracks against her vocals. Um, it's kind of a little bit of industrial, sort of indie rock and shoegaze. I say industrial lightly because it's not rigid, it's not overly overly heavy. It's more heavy on the rock sound. That's why it's not indie pop. It's more like indie rock. Um, but it has really nice. I think one of the best things I appreciate about Curve. And I've also heard the second album. I think it's Cuckoo. Um, I think they had 3 or 4 albums in the '90s. And one thing I really appreciate about them is they have a really strong balance of electronic and rock sound. I feel like, considering they were a few years ahead of Garbage, they sound a lot like Garbage, and it's too bad that they weren't as popular or were celebrated as much as Garbage. Sometimes I feel like that's when you have the American audience and the American industry, and you have the English audience and the English industry, and a band like Curve, why weren't they big in America? Like their sound would have been ideal. It predates Garbage, and I think a lot of the more girl-led bands that are heavy. I don't know if it effervescence or what have you, but Garbage is the first one that comes to mind because it sounds like Garbage at times, and I think even better. And so I'm sure there's if you're in the industry and you're high up and somebody gives you the option of which one to support in your magazine or your radio show, you're probably going to choose an American one over over an international artist if they sort of sound the same, right? If you're getting pressured to support the local labels and over international artists, you're gonna probably have to do that, right? I could see that sort of happening, and If you have two bands that are sort of similar sounding, you're going to push the local band that's tied to local American labels, then the money going elsewhere. I feel like that happens sometimes, especially in the before the '90s, because it's just like, why wasn't this band popular? Why, and you're just like, I just don't think it was either the producer or given the right direction, or just lack of guidance, or from maybe their producer and their label, maybe their manager. Just odd timing. Sometimes it's odd timing, but sometimes it's just like, I mean, Curve was around for a couple albums before Garbage really hit it big. Like, I don't understand why they didn't catch on more. Um, yeah, because it's a great mix of electronic and rock drums, heavy guitar pressing. The nice thing too is they're not trying to be too clever with kind of hip beats. Like, a lot of the beats are the same. Granted, they're all kind of verging on industrial, but they're not like trying to be too clever or trying to be too hip and different or too urban, or which is cool. So it never gets to the point where it becomes like it's been done before. Oh yeah, that beat's kind of similar to the other one, but that's kind of the same as like the Manchester sound of like the early '90s. Like, every Happy Monday song had the same beat. Every Soup Dragon song had the same beat. Every uh, Primal Scream beat had the same beat for the most part. It's just, what I mean. It's kind of that style, like this style, heavier kind of mix of electronic and indie rock. Most of the beats are the same, but I'm happy that they're not trying to be too clever and they come out cheesy. So that's good as well. Um, they're definitely focused on the sound, though. I feel like there might be a little bit too many cooks in the kitchen. Um, Flood and Alan Mulder and Dean Garcia is in the drums and programming. So you got almost three people sort of working on the processing of the sound. So it's sometimes I feel like it's verging on like ear damage. Like, it's a very loud album if you're trying to play it loud. Um, but they're definitely focused on the overall sound of it. I think it would have been nice if they focused on a little bit more of trying to do different songs. The layering and the instruments, lots of good songs for sure on this album. Consistent album for sure, surprisingly. Um, but again, it's kind of verging on some. Could kind of hurt your ears. Maybe on some songs, maybe a little bit better choruses at times would have made the song stand out a little more on this album. There's a lot of sounds that sort of sound familiar to each other. Maybe that's because of the beat. Um, but you can see, like, on the song, they're really close to making a hit. Like a garbage type song, but none of these tracks really fully put it together, in my opinion. As much as I love Flood, this might be the first time I've ever seen in his career where um, he maybe should have took a step back and maybe sort of coached them on a better way to do the vocals, or maybe stand out a little bit more, or um, I don't know, just maybe some different opinion on Flood. I feel like Flood's a good engineer. I'm not sure if he's a good producer. He's a good mixer. He's good in the studio. Not sure if he's a good producer. I can't think of what Flood's technically produced by himself. You know, so I don't know if the direction of the songs, because it seems like it's very focused on the musical side of it, but maybe not so much focused on making a hit, or tying things together and making them a little bit more concise. It's a consistent album, but nothing really goes over the top, and you're like, boom, that's a hit. Like this sound, you would think there would be, because everything's really strong in here overall. There's 10 tracks on here. The first track, Already Yours. Tony's voice is really nice. Man, Tony's beautiful too. She was, man. If there was any girl in alternative rock I had a crush on, it was Tony. She's so beautiful. Um, the production doesn't go overboard on this one, so it's a good song. It's 2 stars. Horror Head I like a little bit better. This could have been a single. Strong song, just good balance of heavy melodic and harmony. 3 stars. Wish You Were Dead, 2.5 stars. Doppelgander I like also. It's a little bit darker. I got 3 stars. And then some of my favorite tracks coming up. Lily's Dying, 3.25 stars. It's one of the better vocals, lyrics wise. I could see this being a potential hit if it was maybe kind of just some of these songs. I feel like could be a little bit better choruses to really kind of push over the top. Ice That Melts the Tips, 3 stars. The bass line is really good. Tony's vocals sticking out more, which is a good thing. Um, Strong track, 3 stars. Split into Fractions, good track as well, 2.75 stars. Thinking Act's one of my favorite, 3.25 stars. Number 9, Fate Accompli. Tighter rhythm, a little bit more rock, a little bit more solid. Overall, though, 2.5 stars, or it should be a little bit more solid. Felt like. And then the last track, 3 stars, Sandpit. Finally comes together, a different song. You know, it took 9 songs to finally get to a song where it feels a little different. Like Sandpit's the last song, and it's kind of a break on your ears. It's kind of a good vocal. It's a nice change of pace. You know, the other 9 albums on here, might be one's a little bit darker or maybe a little bit slower, but for the most part, they're all pretty consistent and not too much different, but they're all so close to like making a hit. It's just like there's maybe too many of those style songs. There's too many good to very good songs, but none of them really pushed over the top to really kind of, I think, help the group as far as the charts and things like that and having a hit. But when you divide the album, 28 and a half, 28 and a quarter stars divided by 10, really strong score of it, 2.82, and that, you know, it rounds up to like a 2.6, a 66 or 67. I gave the album a 65. Um, as far as the opportunity is just, yeah, I already spoke about that. The opportunity is just maybe too many cooks in the kitchen, maybe too many hands on. It's just, it kind of layers to the point where it gets really loud, like I said earlier, and that's got to be because they're just overdoing it. And I could see with Alan Mulder, Flood, and the guy being a programmer in the band, I could see it probably getting a little overdoing this, but it doesn't feel like in the song. It just feels like in the volume of the songs. Nothing feels like it's getting over the top. It just, some of the sounds are really loud, and yeah, I mean Tony's voice is so good. Just seems like a missed opportunity for her voice. Maybe not the right songs on some of them. Just kind of needed like a ballad, you know, needed kind of a different song. You know, like you think of like Garbage, they didn't get popular by doing their heavier songs. They got popular by doing, you know, your sort of unique, kind of catchy ballad ones or slower songs or more melodic songs than doing the heavier ones. You know, so it seems like a missed opportunity. I really think this album is a good album, though. 65 out of 100, right in the middle of good and very good. Doppelgander from 1992. But a really good mix of indie rock, you know, and sort of I wouldn't really say it's a shoegaze. I wouldn't really say it's industrial, so indie rock makes sense, but really good rock album. Curious to know your opinion of this album and what would you score it? Again, my favorite 3 tracks were Lily's Dying, Think and Act, and probably Horror Head. Although I really like Sandpit and Ice That Melts the Tips. And even Doppelgander. I got 4 tracks tied for 3 stars. You know, 4 tracks tied with my third favorite based on my scores. So six of the 10 tracks over 3 stars. It's a good album, really good album. But yeah, just curious your thoughts on it. All right, thanks so much.